Now, for the analysis, you're trying to make sure that basically this entire part, right, is all about making connections between the definition of what digital literacy is and your experience. Now, I'm trying to be. One of the things is it doesn't always have to fit. Okay, it can't. Well, some of it must fit, right? Because in theory, you're talking about digital literacy. So you're like, okay, here's part of digital literacy, this part of this definition that has to do with my experience, and you explain that one. So that's your main goal. It's also possible maybe some part of the definition didn't really apply to your experience, right? You could also write about that if you wanted to, right? So it's not about like, okay, I got to make sure, my experience exactly matches up with this definition. Not really. You need to pull out some of the concepts from the definition and talk about how they connected with you. And maybe this is just up to you, right? Maybe there's something that yours doesn't, because we still can learn, right? You can be like, okay, digital literacy says that but this is not really my experience. Instead, my experience was more like something else, and you explain that. So that's a sort of complex critical thinking thing. In any event, it's making that connection between your story that you told and what digital literacy really is. Focused and meaningful connection between narrative and digital literacy. So sentences. So I guess this is sort of the actual sentences are connecting some aspect of digital literacy to your narrative. You're trying to have a meaningful connection between the two. So here's the thing: it's dependent on how well the first part is, how well you've told a story. So if you have told the story, like for example, I would say you need an introduction. You would want to have 3 solid paragraphs, like you want 3 pages of some sort. So you're trying to, if you tell a story that has a specific episode in which you narrate it and give details, you do all of that stuff, it'll be much easier for you to make that connection. If your story isn't really a story, or it's too short, or it doesn't really talk about anything specific, then you're going to have trouble making that connection. Absolutely. You're going to say, what am I have to say about this? So it's sort of dependent, right? You want to make sure that you take the time to really fully tell this story, and then turn your attention to connecting it to this definition. So when you did the prompts, that's okay. I mean, you did your first draft. That was the first draft of your narrative. And most people's first drafts were pretty short and missing a bunch of things. Meaning like they didn't have a thesis statement really. They didn't really tell a beginning, middle, end story. They did not really focus on a specific episode. So that's why that was difficult, right? So they wrote their first draft. They're missing things. And so then when they turn their attention to the analysis, it's very difficult because their narrative is not that great. So if you have an expansive narrative and you really go through to make the trouble of making sure that you're focusing on an episode and you're revealing some sort of change, then making that connection is easier, and you have more to say automatically. So I would say that's the thing.